Human Rights Cafe. My name is Jacob Sule. When people's rights are tampered with or denied, it means that my rights and yours are being undermined. Hence, we must educate people about their rights. The Human Rights Cafe is a collaborative virtual conversation of a Right to Live initiative to equip new generation of leaders to know, promote, and protect citizens' rights and dignity of all persons. The conversation seeks to promote human rights, justice, peace, and strong institutions as provided for by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Our goal is to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign and respect for citizens' rights. If you'd like to know more about the Human Rights Cafe, please join our conversation on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter via @HRightsCafe. Once again, Jacob Sule. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Human Rights Cafe conversation, streaming live from Washington, D.C. My name is Jacob Sule. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all today and also to wish our Muslim brothers and sisters who are joining this church happy Eid Mubarak and happy celebration. I have my colleague Joannah joining live from Nigeria. Hello, Joannah.
Hello, Jacob. Thank you for having me today on the show. My name is Joannah Titus. I'll be co-hosting the show today with Jacob. I'm co-hosting live from Abuja, Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Joannah. Today we have three guests on the show who will share their post-conference thoughts about the just concluded Transforming Education Summit, which was held in Paris, and the way forward. First, let me introduce Armel. Armel, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jacob, for this opportunity. Hello, everyone, and happy Eid Mubarak to those celebrating today and those who will be celebrating tomorrow. I'm Armel, a youth educational activist from the Comoros Islands.
Thank you and welcome. I also have another guest joining us from the UK. Hello and welcome, Armel Kayode Alabi.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. It's nice to be here. My name is Hamed, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I work in the education and youth space in Nigeria and also in the UK as well. So really looking forward to contributing to this conversation and sharing my reflection from the pre-summit.
Thank you. Yes, Joanna.
Okay, to viewers watching on our various platforms, thank you so much for joining us today. Please feel free to join the conversation by sending in your questions and comments. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Human Rights Cafe, and please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at H Rights Cafe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for that. Very well. And also welcome to all our viewers who are joining us from around the world. Very strictly, we're going to go into the conversation today, and I'll start by laying the foundation for today's conversation in which we want to have. The just concluded Transforming Education Pre-Summit, which was held in Paris, was hosted by UNESCO. And during the summit, we saw a gathering of member states that were nominated by the UN regional groups. We saw member states representing the SDG 4 Education 2030 High-Level Steering Committee. We also witnessed participants from who were education champions and civil society. We also saw delegates from parents representation, teaching profession, academia, private sector, international and multilateral organization. Interestingly, according to the UN Secretary General, he said, and I quote, "The summit was aimed at mobilizing and creating action and also solidarity and solutions with a view to transforming education now and 2030. The expectation of the summit cut across one, national and international commitment to transform education. Secondly, to also create greater public engagement around and support transformation of education, and also a call for action for everyone who are education driven and who have interest in advocating for a greater country where education can thrive. Today, Kayode is joining us all the way from UK. Kayode is a recipient of several scholarships. He works as the executive director and founder of Kayode Alabi Leadership and Career Initiative. Kayode, in 3 minutes, can you tell us about yourself, your work as the chief executive and founder of your initiative, and the reason why you're interested in education advocacy? Thank you.
Oh, that's a lot of question, and I don't even know where to start from. But I would say something. I think I would say that my work in education was driven by my own personal experience and by my own journey, being born and raised in the slum Makoko, and how growing up from there, moving from different slum to another slum, and how education became the lifeline for me, and education became an opportunity for me to change my circumstances, and how people who supported me through that process, how I attended a program when I was 14 years old. It was a program organized by a foundation called MTN Foundation. So in that program, I could recall we were taught about self-esteem, and they say self-esteem is the way you see yourself and the way you see the world, and the way you handle yourself and the way you handle the world. And right there, I knew I needed to do something about my life, about my circumstance. I knew I needed to, like, change my circumstances. And I could recall when I was 15, I applied to be a basic education teacher in Ibubu, Ikorodu, a rural community. And I could see, employee playway method to teach kids in rural communities, and how, when you're using playway to teach like basic literacy and numeracy skills, and how you can see children who people think that they cannot learn, how they started improving in their literacy level. I could see the change I could make in my own way and in my own community. And I believe that with those little changes, people could change their circumstances. So leveraging on my own journey, looking at my own experience, looking at how my own trajectory changed, because of the support and opportunities I got. I wanted children in rural communities and underserved communities to have access to the same opportunities, that with access to skills, opportunities, and education, children in rural and underserved communities can change their circumstances. And this is the space that I'm creating for children in rural communities, children in underserved communities, and this is the basis, why I started Kayode Leadership and Career Initiative. That if I can change my circumstances, they can change their circumstances too, and they can understand. I mean, they live in their community. They could see the problem that they face in their communities, and they could come up with solutions to those problems and to those challenges. So creating space for them to co-create solutions, and through co-creating those solutions, they can develop the life and 21st century skills that is needed in the ever-changing world today. And I think that's the basis of my work. I think I would stop there. And yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Kayode, for that very insightful answer. Okay, the next question is for Amel. You have a very strategic position as UNESCO SDG for Youth representative to the Transforming Education Summit Advisory Committee. Could you please tell us about your transitioning and the story into being an educational activist and your many other interesting works?
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Armel from the Comoros Island. I work with the NGO called Imara Comoros. We stand for Emirate African. So our NGO is created to help rather Comorians to discover and learn more, because we've living in a country which is really conservative because of religion side. Mostly women are left behind because we're living in our community where many women wanted to do many things, but because of culture and religion, they say you can't do that because you are a woman. That's what motivated us to create the organization and support women, but we're working both men and girls. So we work in 3 different areas, which is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, arts, and leadership. So within the arts is to help mostly women like naturally be depending on governments after their study, but they can also be creative and using their hands and create stuff. And also in terms of the STEM area, because we were lucky to be the first NGO that is build a robot in the country and represent the country in a world robotics competition. So my passion to the work is that I didn't have any trouble in my life, like in education side. Like I had everything I wanted to study, but I didn't have a platform to discover my talent. Like I wanted to do many things, like I wanted to be an engineer, but I was really discouraged. So when I grow up, I decided that I want to be that elders who can support young people or what they want to be in life. So that's why like really motivated me to join the NGO and work them and support young girls on their dreams, because that is really the problem. They don't have anyone to talk to or to trust to on what they want to be in life. So that's what really motivated me. And I work with the AU, the African Union, like on the education area with the former youth invo, like on the specifically during the COVID on the youth African Youth Front on coronavirus. So from that, like I had been sent to as a youth educational leader to the GPE, and from that the SDG4 Youth Network, and I have been nominated by the SDG4 Youth Network as the youth representative to the Advisory Youth Committee, as we know that we want to live in an inclusive world where even in the high level committee, but would love to have places for young people. So yeah, that's what led me to be in the position where I am now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Armel and Kayode, for such an interesting and great work in which you're doing to see to ensure that we can have access to education for our children, regardless of where they find themselves. We're just being joined by Kenisha Arora. She's joining in from Canada. Kenisha is also a UNESCO youth representative for North America and Europe. Kenisha, welcome.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and hear Armel's story.
Thank you so much. Kenisha, my question for you is, you have an interesting background in medical science and nonprofit advocacy, also for quality education. Specifically, like I said, you are a UNESCO youth representative for North America and Europe. Tell us why you're so passionate about education and give us an insight into your work around education. Yes, Kenisha?
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. Well, growing up, I thought the world was perfect. My parents were immigrants from India, and so we came to Canada when I was very, very young. And they saw Canada as the land of hope and endless possibilities. So to me, the world used to be perfect. But I quickly realized as I was growing up that maybe systems and people are not that perfect in practice. My best friend actually dropped out of high school because of the inaccessibility of menstrual hygiene products. And for me to hear her story and learn about what period poverty really means and how something so biological could actually be a barrier to education in Canada, let alone the 21st century, was really shocking. And that was the same year I was actually elected as a school board trustee for a board here near the Toronto area. And so I had this great privilege to be able to represent over 150,000 young people and students. But what does that really mean on an educational level? And how does academic policy kind of play a role in dismantling these inequities? That was something that I had to learn. And so the first thing that I did when I was elected was actually push for providing free menstrual hygiene products in our school washrooms. And ever since then, I mean, it was, of course, an uphill battle, as you can all imagine. But after 9 or 8 months of working hard and really trying to educate the other trustees and stakeholders in our board, we were able to have free menstrual hygiene products in all school washrooms. And this actually inspired our minister in Ontario, the province that I'm from, to do the same for all schools in our province. And so for me, education has always been a way of dismantling societal inequities and unleashing the talents and true potential of young people. It's given me a lot of the resources and opportunities that I have in my life. And I know Armel talked about STEM education. That's really core to who I am. My father always gave me the opportunity to explore, whether it was robotics or, doing research in a lab. I always had those opportunities available to me. And I recognize that there's a great privilege around it. And so during the year of 2020, my sister and I realized that there's a lot of people in our society who don't have same privileges as us, and hope itself was a big commodity that many people don't have either. This was the year of COVID-19. And so we started our own nonprofit, the Hope Sisters, and we really just started as a way of writing cards for seniors in long-term care and retirement homes, but that quickly transitioned into a movement of hope. We made hope eggs for children in welfare systems and gave them books and toys, just something to keep them hopeful and their spirits up during COVID. But now we've transitioned into really providing educational experiences and opportunities through our hope eggs. And so we're working with my university to create science kits and other partners to create more different types of kits to provide these learning opportunities to students that, me and my sister once had. But with the work with UNESCO and the Transforming Education Summit, we're all committed to really increasing capacity building from all levels in education, from primary, foundational learning, all the way up to higher education and lifelong learning and beyond. And it's honestly a great privilege for me to work with people like Armel and other young leaders across the world to be able to reimagine what the future of education and change in education should look like.
All right. Thank you very much, Kenisha. It's nice having you on the show today. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for your insightful answer. We see what you're doing, and it's a good one. We're really grateful. The next question, I would love to direct it to Kayode. Basically, we know education is a human right and it serves as a tool to restore trust and solidarity. So, to help build new social contract and lifelong learning. So, education can also be used to rebuild and deliver tangible benefits for all around the world. Would you please describe to us what is the state of education in your country? Does the Constitution provide for education as a human right? Please, Kyrie.
Oh, this is a very interesting question, and I mean, I like the fact that you direct it to like the Constitution. And when it comes to like the Constitution, we are talking about the national policy on education in Nigeria, basically, and how the policy actually like prepares children and young people for for national building and for the workforce. And when you look at the Nigerian policy, I think we have a really good policy because the policy seems holistic. I've read through the policy before. I mean, while I was studying education myself in the university, and also while working on the ground, and also like even reviewing the policy to look at what are the needs, what are the gaps in the policy. And when I read the policy, I mean, it's the goals and objective of the policy is to create a well-rounded individual who will be able to contribute, to national, building to restore the economic, growth of the country and to create, problem solvers, within the country. And if you look at it, you will see there's basic education, which is universal basic education. There is teachers training. There is nomadic education for nomads as well. There is like it covers so many aspects of education. In fact, the policy covered girls' education. So we shouldn't say that probably Nigeria do not have policy that covers those things. But the problem now is that yeah, this is a policy that talks about an holistic view, an holistic way, holistic pathway to develop an individual. But do we really have programs, that helps in the implementation of the policy, or do we even have, are these policies really, really implemented? And if you also look at it, one of the policy I would like you to even carefully look at, that is driving, education, because if you want to prepare people for the workforce or you want to prepare people for the future, people need to build the basic foundational skills, which is basic literacy and numeracy skills. But you can't do that without adequate funding to the educational sector, or when children are learning in depleted buildings and classroom. In 2018, I was working as an SDGU champion, and I traveled across three regions in Nigeria. And I mean, while I was collecting this data, exploring development issues, exploring educational issues, just seeing things that are happening in rural and underserved communities, I could recall, we had students, who were working barefooted to the classroom. We had teachers who were not coming to class. And then we asked those teachers, why are you not coming? Why are you not teaching? They said, well, the school are far away from where we are living. We don't have money, for to cover our basic needs. So how are students learning? So students are in school. Obviously, yes, they'll say, oh, numbers of students are in school, but students are not learning. This connects, to the statistics. When you look at it, that 70% of people who are 10 years old cannot read and write. You could see the situation, you could see the connection between teachers not being in school to teach, or teachers not earning a lot. And because they are not earning a lot, they come to classroom and they don't bother teaching, bother with their own businesses that they are running in the school or in the classroom. So we shouldn't just have policies, or we shouldn't just put policies in place. We should look at what are the implications for those policies when it comes to the implementation of those policies. We should look at how these policies have been implemented, how how are teachers not having access to resources. For example, imagine a public school teachers collecting less than maybe $50 per month. Is not some people don't even earn up to that. You could even go to some low income private schools where people are earning $10 or even $20. How do students want to learn
Thank you.
when
Thank you so much, Kelly. On that point, I want to take up other guests who are joining us on this show. You've talked so much about, I'm sorry to cut you, you've talked so much
yeah,
about cities
yeah.
and reality in your country. Fortunately, I'm a Nigerian and I can relate with all of these experiences in which you're sharing. Let me touch base with Amel. You are from, in your country, what is the position of human rights? Sorry. What is the position of education? Are there legal provisions for education as a human right? If yes, tell us about your experience in education in your country. Yes, Amir.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Yeah, there is a provision of human rights in my country. I would say like education is mostly like primary school is free, and there is college and lycée like in my country, but there is private school. If you prefer to take your kid to private school, that's your own choice. But education is free. The problem is now like that is like why us like people working in the NGOs and advocate, like the problem is within our curriculum, because what my mother was studying was the same thing that I used to study in my age. So you can imagine like the problem is within our policy and curricula. It's not updated. So, and we know that the world is moving. There are many things that has changed. There are many things that should be changed, but we are still using the same curricula and the same policy that our mother were using. So that is the main problem on our education, as I can say now. Because I can take you the example, like in 2018, where our NGO went to parents and asked them, like, we want to work with their daughters on the robotics team, and they were saying that no, I don't want my daughter to become an engineer or like someone who builds a robot, because she should become a teacher or who work as a secretary, but I don't want her to do those kind of work, because that is work that are meant to men. So I think that's also playing a role, because if our policy, our curriculum and policy has changed, parents will know that at school students are learning about robotics and so on. So that is one of the main issues on our education now. It's not really affiliated with the reality on the ground. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Amel. Okay, Kenisha, please, can you also share your own view about the state of education in Canada?
Absolutely. I think, a lot of the different countries that I've spoken to, they always look at Canada as an example of what education should be, or at least one of the countries as an example. And for me to even work in the education systems here and be on the Senate of my university, I've seen that there's still a lot of dysfunction, even in our own country. There's, Black students who are disproportionately being suspended. There's a lot of systemic racism, and there's a lot that needs to be addressed around student safety as a human right in education. It's not enough to just have access to schools or be invited into a school system or even the classroom. We must ensure that every student feels safe when they are in that school building. We must ensure that every student feels excited to learn and included in their learning process. But as we've seen in North America, even in the States, sometimes schools are not the safest place for any child. And that really breaks my heart to see all the shootings, the disproportionate suspending, the really criminous acts that have been, students have been faced with because of their skin color, background, or socioeconomic status and zip code. And so I think there's a lot that needs to be done in Canada and the United States specifically around improving education and the safety and well-being of students themselves. I always say that, a lot of my friends from Malawi, they tell me about the state of education there, and they say how a lot of the practices are based on faith-based learning and community-based learning. And I really wish that, more schools in Canada taught more students to be more empathetic. I've always been an advocate for embedding empathy and humanity in education itself. And how do we really do that? In Canada and the States, a lot of our education system is focused on making sure that our students are calculator brained, they can solve all the best formulas in an instant, and it's a lot more focused on memorization and not so much application of knowledge into the real world, or even solving problems from what you know that might be the right solution from your heart or your gut, or how do you use your knowledge to solve the biggest problems in society and our community at large. How do we really apply that for social good? And I really wish that education could transform and transition into that, focus more on social good and community good, as opposed to just becoming A+ students and memorizing the most formulas or the most biological concepts. And I see that with a lot of my peers in my medical science program itself also. It's so much focused on memorizing these chemical compounds and not so much about how does this chemical compound really change or save someone's life. And that's really what I wish our state of education looked like. But hopefully, with change makers in like the call today, we can have more of that transition happening.
Thank you so much, Kenisha, for that real thought of yours. Interestingly, I've listened to Kayode, Kenisha, and also Amel. One thing keeps coming from each of the speakers in which we have here today: the state of education in their country. They have been able to identify the challenges, but regardless of these challenges, these young educators, activists, are not being subjected to the challenge. They're working tirelessly to ensure that they address the issues of inequalities and inequity in education. Now, this will take me to the next questions on strategies. You all attended the just concluded pre-summit in Paris, and I'm sure there were so many ideas, so many contributions from governments, ministers, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and very many young people like myself and you who are advocating for education. Now, the question is, what strategies can we put in place to ensure that we have an all-inclusive education learning environment, specifically for those who are physically challenged, for those who are less privileged, and for those who are refugee or those who are seeking asylum? What policies or what measures can we put in place to ensure that everyone has access to education? Yes, Kayode, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And as Kenisha was saying, was speaking, and I was reflecting as she was talking about, the school being an oasis of learning, the school being a place where you can be protected. That's what the school should do. But today we can't say the same for the school because people go to school being scared of their lives, and it shows the challenges and different challenges that countries are facing regarding education. And we need the school to be a safe space for kids, for them to explore their creativity and for them to explore who they are, their uniqueness. And when it comes to like creating an all-inclusive space or an all-inclusive education, I think the first thing we need to understand is that like Anisha said, it's not enough to to provide access to school or provide access to education. We need to look at what happens in the school, what goes on in the school itself. And I think that's why we need to look beyond redistribution policies that focus more on like getting more people in school. We need to like they say, oh, there are about 223 million children who are crying out of school. We need to get them back into school. It's not enough to get people back into school. We need to have recognition policies, recognizing the diversity of the students, of the people who get into school. So it's not enough for us to have redistribution policy. We need to start looking at recognition policies. So refugees who go into school, how do they learn? What challenges do they go through? The mental health challenges that they go through in school, the fact that they can't even ask questions because they're even scared to talk to a teacher and to tell their stories, to the teachers, the school authority, the principals, the teachers. They need to be trained on equality, diversity, and inclusion in school. They need to be able to understand what it means to be different in school. They need to understand what it means, to support a child who is a refugee, who because they're a refugee, they might end up dropping out because they're not getting the necessary support in the school system or in the school itself. So again, I mean, I can go on and on to mention, strategies that we need to, we need to look at. So as from recognition policy, we also need to build teachers who are reflective. and principals and school authority who are reflective of their position. Because it's fine that you might not even know. It might be unconscious because you don't know. When you know and you're reflective of your position, you're able to support each and every student to fulfill their potential in the classroom. So there is a need to build teachers who are reflective, and that's why I'm like, it's not enough. Like, you need to provide teachers training, you need to look at recognition policies, you need to engage the school authority, you need to engage the ministries that provide the policies, you need to involve all stakeholders to drive the educational agenda and to ensure we create a space that is inclusive for all students, for all learners coming in from from anywhere or from any background across the world. Basically, I think I would stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Kayode. Kenisha, I would like to throw the same question to you too. What strategies do you believe can be put in place to ensure that we have an inclusive system of education?
Thank you so much for that question, Joanna. I think the first biggest thing that every country needs to focus on is ensuring that if education really is a priority, it needs to be reflected in the budget. Right now, we see the average of countries that are investing their GDP in education to be around 3 to 4%. We need to increase that to at least 4 to 5%. And I know education in Canada is a 5.9% investment of our GDP, but even still, we need to ensure that every individual country has an expenditure of at least 12 to 15% of their public funding in education. That's the first biggest thing, because if we can't put our money where our mouth is, then honestly no transformation is ever going to be made. So the biggest thing first is financing education, and that to be something that's a priority for every single country. That's how we're going to be reducing gaps. The second thing after investing in education is figuring out what does that investment mean for an individual child. And an individual child who doesn't have the same experience as the child beside them. In a classroom, we have so many diverse stories. And so it's really important to see and understand what does each child, for example, what does David in a classroom who might be a refugee student in Canada, who might be from a visible minority or even have a disability, what is investment for that student? What does David need to thrive in the world and in the classroom and feel safe and included? And that's how we should be making our investments. Investment should not only be, oh, I spent $10 million in X amount of project. We need to ensure that investments are made in children, because if we invest in young people, that's really when society is transformed, by investing in people and not only systems. And so those are the top two priorities that I would say. And then coming after that, we all need to recognize that, yes, education is a human right, but education does also play a role in preserving the other human rights. So what do I mean by that exactly? Well, by educating young people, we can allow them to feel a place in society and reduce the gap that we already have in society around privilege, access to professional development, access to opportunities to grow, access to jobs. And this is really what can break the cycle of poverty, education. And so we need to recognize education as a human right, but also the role it plays in preserving human rights.
Thank you so much, Kenisha, for that. Kenisha talked about funding for education. Kayode talked about making schools creative. Armel, you wear so many hats as, yes, as a representative of the UNESCO for youth, and you also do a lot of work as a teacher, if I'm correct. Tell us your experience from your country. How do you think we can achieve inclusivity? Because if you look at the target of SDGs 4, it says by 2030, we must ensure that all boys and girls, regardless of the color of your skin or where you live, have access to free, quality, and equitable education. Tell us, what is it like, and what are you doing to ensure that every boy and girls have access to education? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. I think, first of all, or just to add on what my colleague said, is training teachers, because, yeah, we believe that it's important that we fund education, but when we find it, like the teacher that are going to teach our kids, how are they going to teach them? So I think like it's also important, like we train teachers, like emotionally training, because we understand that there are many kids that are bullying at school, and there are most of them are bullying by their teachers. There are those who are bullying by their peers. But I think like training teachers is very important. And on the inclusive having boy and girls in school, we really have to put gender on the agenda. And for that to be possible, we should have a discussion with, because I can take example like living in a conservative and religious country where women don't have a say. Because even us doing our advocacy, it's very difficult, because it came in a moment when you go to advocacy in a rural area. I can't take the floor because I'm a woman. It should be a man taking the floor, even though I'm the one who is expert on that area. But being in the community where we are, as a woman, I don't have the floor. And this is because of the religion and the culture. So I think it should be a time where our country should have a discussion between not comparing religion and culture and human rights, because we believe that education is a human right, whatever your religion, whatever you believe, but the right should apply to everyone. So for that to be possible, for us to have an inclusive world where girls and women will be treated equally, we should break the taboo around all the area, either related to culture or religion, because that's what I can say. Like it's really the gap that is stopping the inclusive education. It's the gaps on religion and culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amel, for that thought. And this will take me to the next question. And this is really the gist of the conversation. The pre summit had come and has ended. But during the pre summit in Paris, so many issues were highlighted. And one of those three sections that were highlighted were the issues of national consultation, thematic action tracks, and then public engagement and mobilization. Kenisha, you have an interesting background in medicine and then nonprofits and the work in which you're doing with your nonprofits, which you founded in Canada. Tell us the real situation on ground. How do you think we can mobilize government resources, stakeholders, to be a part, not just making press statements? How do you think we can mobilize people to actually pay attention, like you said, to fund education, like Amel said, to train teachers, like Kayode said, to ensure that schools are safe and then a place for creativity for our students? How do you think, from the conference that has ended, how do you think we can put together all of our energy to ensure that we truly transform education in our individual countries? Yes, Kenisha.
Thank you. To really transform education and encourage government leaders to be able to know it's a priority, we as individuals need to make education for ourselves, our peers, our sisters and brothers a priority as well. You know, we've seen with the climate change movement, the reason why it's been able to mobilize a lot of the government leaders is because we've shown that as young people, it's something that's so core to our existence and being in the world. And so if we do the same by showing that, yes, education is a right for us, and we start to care about our education and the education for our peers, that's only then we can start creating this movement around the urgency for change. You know, I always say that it's really difficult to feel the effects of dreams and hopes and visions of young people being lost, but it's so easy to feel the effects of climate change. And so how do we really invest in education when a lot of the times it's not a priority or seen as a priority right now? And that's really by advocating and continuing to mobilize more young people to share their stories about why education is so important to them and building their future, but also how investing in a child is not only investing in that child itself, but the future and community around us. And that's really what we need to shift our mindset, that investing in youth is investing in our future.
Okay, thank you very much, Kenisha. Okay, Kayode, I'll address the next question to you. So, in your own words and in your own view, how do you think that we can improve literacy? Because basically, one of the pre-summit intersecting workstream area talked about public engagement and mobilization. So, how can we totally improve literacy in line with transforming education?
Yeah, thanks again for that question. And I think again, like I mentioned earlier, when you have access to the basic literacy, skills, you have all it takes to succeed. Because how would you be able to read doctor prescription? How would you be able to, even perform just basic transaction if you don't have access to the basic literacy skills? And then we're talking about the literacy deficiency that is currently happening today in our school, and our children could not even read a simple sentence, even at the age of 10, or even understand what it says. I mean, I could recall, a World Bank released an article where they said a dog is a puppy, and they asked some children to read whether the dog is a puppy, and they can read. It's not about reading, right? Literacy is beyond reading, but understanding the text and understanding the meaning of the text. And that's how transformation happens. That's how change happens. When you're able to read, when you're able to understand, and when you're able to apply what you've read, you're able to do things, you're able to create things, you're able to change things. So now, coming back to your question of how can we improve literacy in our schools today, we need to start thinking about creative ways of how we can accelerate learning for children. We need to think about using play method to teach children. You need to need about applying audiovisual methods to teach children. We need to start looking at how we can leverage technology to deliver some of these learning resources and learning materials. I mean, I could recall, this was like many years ago, 2009, 15 years old boy teaching in a basic education rural school in Nigeria. And, I was even teaching basic literacy and numeracy skills basically. And, I would, if I'm spelling bag, I carry the bag, jump with the kids, and we're jumping together, we're spelling together. These are creative ways, right? And I'm able to make that transformation because I understand, what it means to teach children. So again, we need to go back to the teachers. We need to train the teachers to ensure they are able to communicate some of these learning resources in a creative way so that each individual can learn in the school system. So again, we need to have teachers who are able to use creative ways to address some of this learning deficiencies, some of these literacy deficiencies. Teachers who are technology inclined, people who understand, how they can use technology, who understand, how they can even use technology to understand the needs of the learners and the needs of the students. So again, there are many ways we want to see this, and there are many dimensions to this issue. But I think one of the ways we could do is train teachers, to accelerate learning and to ensure help the students learn and develop the basic literacy skills that are needed in the ever-changing world. I would have added more in terms of data and statistics based on a study that I read, but I think I will keep that for another conversation, basically.
All right, thank you very much, Kayode, for that insightful answer. Okay, Amel, you too, in your own view, what are the ways we can improve literacy in line with transforming education?
Thank you very much, Joanna. So, on my point, I can share like what we are doing within my NGO in order to improve literacy. Because what Kayode was saying in Nigeria, like finding young kids age of 10 and 11 who doesn't even know how to read, it's also the same thing in Comoros. So what we are trying to do, like in all our activities, we do have different games because we do understand that kids love playing because for them they think they are just playing. So but we're trying to encourage them like to play while learning at the same time, because this help them, like because for them they are not putting their energy on the learning, but they are putting their energy on the playing. But at the same time, they are learning because when they go back home, they will remember what they were doing. We're also trying, like, because now we are living in the world of technology, and we know that most our kids are using the tablet and phone. Those who have access to it. So we are trying like to use like, because specifically work on the STEM area on teaching kids on coding and Scratch. So we use the application called Scratch, and it's animated kind of like animated movie and apps. So the kids, we're teaching them like the alphabet within the animated tools. So they are there like playing, but at the same time, because it's also spelling what they are doing. So at the same time, they are learning. So I do believe like trying to find out what our kids love to do. They love playing basketball. We can try to use like literacy, like something related to what they love to do, because creating those creative ways will allow them to learn at the same time, because we can live in a world like we're going to for them like you have to memorize this because you have to know it, but we have to do it in a way that they won't feel the pressure, so they will learn freely. So we should look on all those strategies that will help kids to learn without having any pressure, and also having the passion, because we know without the passion you can't learn anything. But if we know that's what they like, and we align what we want to teach them with what they like, that's will all going to help them. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, can I add to what Amel has shared?
Sure,
And
you can.
just to quickly add to what Amel has shared, I think we also need to think about complementary pathways, that allows children, in a place like rural and South communities, to develop their skills. And what do I mean by complementary pathways? Sometimes, maybe if teachers might not have the capacity, school needs to think about NGOs working on this issue and thinking about how they can collaborate with these NGOs. And I've seen young people, young people know the problems and the challenges of the 21st century. And they've created solutions and initiatives that drive some of these changes and solutions. So there's a need for the government to see some of these initiatives and work with them, rather than seeing them as like, oh, we are, you're trying to use up our work or our problem or challenges. They need to see them as collaborators, especially. For example, Iraha created something, something like text to speech, where you look at, like, you write kind of like something on text, and children would place like a earphone and they are looking at the text, and they can read as well. So we need to look at some of these complementary pathways, some of these innovations that have been created, that young people have created, and work with them towards ensuring that children can learn in school, and they can read, write, and basically.
Thank you so much, Kayode. There's a question from LinkedIn, and the question is from Ademola Taiwo. He says, I like the fact that Kenisha said we should put our money where our mouth is. My question is, how have you been engaging lawmakers or policymakers to increase the budgetary percentage for education? I think this person is asking you what you've been doing in Canada to ensure that lawmakers are being engaged. That is policymakers. Yes, Kenisha, quickly in 30 seconds, can you quickly respond to that question?
Absolutely. So in my Senate and Board of Governors, we do a lot of governance around education itself. And what we do is really host consultations with young people to hear what their passions are and what investments we need to make in our education system. So, for example, during my time as school board trustee, I worked with the Ministry of Education to do a whole systematic review on dismantling systemic racism for Black students and other racialized minorities in our school board. And I also passed the motion to provide free menstrual hygiene products. So my advocacy is going to continue to work with all lawmakers and policymakers of Canada.
Thank you so much, Kenisha, for that swift and very short response. My next question would be I think we have a question again from the same person. The person wants to know, he said, Kayode, what has been the initiative programs to help young children at the slums to have access to education? Yes, Kayode, in 3 seconds, tell us very straightly what has been the initiative programs to help young children at the slums to have access to education.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways is organizing like a complementary program, like a boot camp where children in rural communities, co-create solutions to their own problem, even with low literacy level. They can create solutions and they can learn, through their peers basically, and have an opportunity for conversation and even develop their literacy skills through that process. So I think that's one of the programs, that I'm currently running through my NGO. Basically, I would have mentioned like other programs that people have created, but you gave me 3 seconds, so I will just stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Joanna, do we have any questions from?
Okay, I think we have one here from one of our audience. The person is asking if there are ongoing commitments made to foster the transforming of education, which will serve as an inspiration to other nations. If there are ongoing commitment policies that will help to encourage other nations to follow suit. I think it's directed to Kenisha.
Sounds great. So the question is asking if there's current strategies.
Yes, in place that will serve as a means to other nations to learn from, to follow suit.
Yeah, well, during the Transforming Education Summit, we heard the pre summit, we heard a lot from Finland itself and how they're really involving their young people to focus more on practice based learning. And for our country, I think Finland has always been a great inspiration. So I definitely look to their practices. But I remember a quote by Benjamin Franklin. He said, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn." And I really think that's the biggest practice that every single country should be focused on. And at the high level steering committee, we pulled out a call to action that really involves and asks every single country to commit to the 5 action tracks and their progress. So, from the discussion reports that each action track is going to be recommending and putting forward, they're really going to be investing and understanding how they can implement, each country can implement these action tracks in their own practices. So I definitely encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast or interview today to really focus in on each action track and share your recommendations on the Transforming Education website as to what recommendations you'd like to see each country implement. But for other practices and country makers and lawmakers, I'd really recommend everyone look at Finland, the practices that that country is really embedding, and even Venezuela, because that delegation of a country has involved a lot of young people in their Ministry of Education to transform really and shape that ministry itself.
Thank you very much, Kenisha. Okay, the next question. Amel, sorry. Please, can you share your final thoughts on transforming education in 1 minute?
Wow, 1 minute. All right, thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to also to add on that, like something that countries should really follow is what the Minister of Education of Sierra Leone, His Excellency David Senge, is doing in his country, like having a youth advisor group, which is something that we believe like countries should do, because yeah, we are youth representative internationally, but we should also be nationally. So I think in order to transform education, we should engage young people, not really in international level only, but within our national. And in order to for this to be possible, it's not only education, it's not only for advocate or activists who work in the education area. Education is for everyone. So we are calling out everyone to come and join us in order to make this possible, because we know that education is the future and the future is belong to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Amel. Kayode, same question. Your final thoughts on transforming education in 1 minute?
Yeah, thanks. When COVID happened, and there was a learning crisis, who were at the forefront responding to that learning crisis? They were young people. People, there was a lot of money that was being, committed to education, but none of those money went to young people who are actually on the grassroots. Young people are actually leading the change. And to actually transform education, I mean, I could recall at the summit, EU promised to give 300 billion euros to education. Some of those money should go directly to young people who are working on the grassroots. So to transform education, we need to invest in ideas of young people changing the education landscape. We need to provide them with the resources and tools to truly transform education. Those are the people who can create the solution. Those are the people who can create the change. And that's how we can transform education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kayode. Kenisha, over to you. Your final thoughts on transforming education in 1 minute?
I think the most important thing to be able to achieve the visions and dreams of young people is to really work together. If we don't work together as all stakeholders in education, policymakers, private sectors, leaders, grassroots leaders, and even NGOs, then we really can't achieve the vision that we have. And it's impossible for us to change the direction of change itself. It's really important that we do together come together and ideate a lot of these different investments in education, because if we don't make the change now, then I promise everyone that the damages are going to be much worse. So we really do need to start investing now, and we need to start coming together now. We are the generation of young people who are going to make all the change. So if we don't do this now, we are going to see the effects of worse damages. So let's come together, make this happen, and be bold in our asks and vision for the future.
Thank you so much, Kenisha. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Amel, for a great chat. Now, you notice Amel, Ahmed, There's something like that in English language called what? There's a word like that when you compare pronunciations. So I want to thank you very sincerely, viewers who are joining us from around the world. I can see your comment. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Today, I've been speaking with Kayode. Kayode is the executive director and founder of the Kayode Alabi Leadership Initiative and Career Initiative. He's joining us from UK. Thank you very much, and we're happy to have you. I've also been speaking to Kenisha Arora, who has joined in from Canada. Kenisha is a UNESCO youth representative for North America and Europe, and also been speaking to Armel Kayode, who is also a UNESCO SDG4 youth representative to the Transforming Education Summit Advisory Committee from Comoros. Ladies and gentlemen, we've now come to the end of the show, and I do hope that we will continue to talk about our initiatives as young people on how we can transform education and make the world better than we are. Do not forget, goal number 4 says by 2030, we must ensure that all boys and girls have access to free, quality, and equitable education. I'd like to thank you all once again, and we look forward to hosting another session next week. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend, or enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you all. Welcome to the Human Rights Cafe. My name is Jacob Sule. When people's rights are tampered with or denied, it means that my rights and yours are being undermined. Hence, we must educate people about their rights